Hello and welcome to Top Class with me, Duncan Crawford, where we're talking about alternative pathways into teaching. Around the world, traditional teacher preparation programmes aren't always meeting demand. In some countries, this is leading to staffing issues, especially in underserved areas. Are alternative pathways into teaching part of the solution? Well, opening up non-traditional routes can help tackle staff shortages and lead to a more diverse workforce, bringing in teachers with more varied experiences and expertise. Alternative routes into teaching are also usually more flexible and accessible, making it easier for people to switch careers. The OECD has released a new paper on the subject called Alternative Pathways into Teaching, Broadening Access and Expanding Diversity. The paper maps out the situation across OECD countries and outlines a framework for understanding the main types of programmes. Today, we're looking at one of those up close, the Nexus model from Australia. To discuss all this, I'm joined by Professors Joanna Barbousas and Miriam Tanti. Both are professors from Trobe University in Melbourne, and they work on the Nexus programme. It's a nationally recognised programme that allows people to earn a teaching qualification while working in schools. Also joining us, Barbara O'Brien, the principal of Greater Shepparton Secondary College in the Australian state of Victoria, who's employed new trainee teachers from the Nexus programme. Thank you, all of you, for joining me today.
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you so much. Professors Joanna Barbousas and Miriam Tanti, if I can start with you both. What inspired the Nexus programme, and is it very different from other alternative pathways into teaching?
I might start, and I'm sure Miriam will jump in. So we conceptualised this program back in 2019, and it was in the throes of teacher shortages across the country, but particularly in Victoria. We weren't the first employment-based pathway, but we were the first ones to design it, and it's termed differently across the world. But in Victoria, we refer to education support officers. Some refer to them as teachers' aides. So the way the program is designed is our Nexus students come into a Master of Teaching coursework, and as they're doing their coursework, they also are matched into a school and begin as education support officers. So the idea is to really embed them in the school culture from the beginning and to link them directly into the community of the school and the community from which they are placed. And usually the focus was initially on regional and rural schools and hard to staff schools, which is how we refer to them in Australia.
So Miriam Tanti, just to follow up on what Joanna was saying there, can almost anyone decide they want to be a teacher in that case, take part in the programme and become an education support officer?
Not anybody, but in saying that, we've obviously got a variety of iterations that might suit people with different skills and expertise. So the Nexus program started and was developed for high-performing career changers. So these are people who have a bachelor degree. Often, actually, they also have a master's and some have a PhDs, and they're wanting to transition into the teaching profession. So from inception, it was actually designed for high-performing career changers. Now, there are several other iterations of the Nexus program. So we've got an undergraduate Nexus program, which is designed for current teacher aides who don't have a bachelor degree, who want to, get their full qualification as a teacher. And we're also looking at an early childhood Nexus program as well, so for current early childhood educators.
So does that mean on all of these schemes that essentially as soon as someone starts the programme, they can be placed into classrooms and they will be working with students essentially almost immediately?
Not immediately, because we do value the theory and the theoretical component of what makes you an effective and meaningful teacher. And so they do start off doing coursework for the first probably 10 weeks of the program, or first school term. And then what we do is, and this is what's really unique about the Nexus program, is that there's this incremental progression. So as they develop their understanding of the profession, so, what are different pedagogies? How do I manage classroom behaviour? Do I understand my syllabus, curriculum, content? We increase the days. So they'll go from 1 day a week in one term, and then the following 2 terms they'll do 2 days a week, and then they'll generally progress up to 4 days a week. So it's a really slow, deliberate, considered, measured approach to helping them transition fully into the teaching profession.
And is that where they're a support officer, they're working with another teacher in the classroom?
Yes, so this is another great feature of the Nexus program. So they are working very closely with a school-based mentor, and that is a one-on-one relationship. But we've actually got a triadic model. So we also have university mentors that will go into schools, and they will mentor not just our own students, but the teachers as well. So we're capacity building both the student and the teachers in schools.
Okay. And Joanna, Miriam mentioned that you're targeting people with degrees and other criteria. Are there particular kinds of professions? Are you seeing any trends in the kind of people who are wanting to switch into teaching?
Look, we've really been paying attention to this because it's been quite interesting to see over the 5 years who applies. So we have a range of engineers, people with PhDs, a lot of STEM applicants as well. We also are finding that I think it's about 60%, if not more, actually come in with a strong community engagement background where they have in their own time participated in either charities or NGO work or working in community. And that's been quite a significant component of the skills needed to work in schools where they're needed the most and in communities that are really begging for high-quality teachers coming in. I just wanted to add to what Miriam was saying around the wraparound support. That is a really strong component of the Nexus program, which is why we have such a strong and high retention rate, because of the mentoring and the support and the links between school, university, and also the role that community plays in that support structure.
What do the wannabe teachers taking part in the program, what do they tell you? Why are they choosing to do this program as opposed to doing a traditional teacher training route?
As Joanna said, there's a really big social justice element to the program. And so these students, it's approximately 72% of these students actually do want to become agents of change. So they really have decided that teaching is a vocation and they want to make a switch for that. In addition to, obviously, there are barriers that we've been able to negotiate and reduce so that they can come into the profession. And so some of those barriers that we've sort of been able to reduce to uptake are things like providing a scholarship. So we provide them with a $15,000 scholarship, and that is for them to use as they wish. They also get paid while they work. So all of the time in schools is paid time. So these students get paid for the employment-based component, and a lot of the study is asynchronous. So there's that real flexibility in terms of they can study when and where suits them. So there's real flexibility. And I'll also add that 94% of our graduates actually then get teaching roles within, their first year or soon after graduation. So the opportunities for employment are extremely high as well.
Has there been any pushback from the current teaching workforce, for example, who would have gone through traditional teacher training programs, who question, why are they getting scholarships and being put in classrooms this early when we weren't allowed to?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think because employment-based pathways have been going on for a little while in Australia, I think it's always been an option, and people consider them for very specific reasons. I don't think we've even heard necessarily of why them and not me, because the options are open to anyone, but the criteria is very clear about why. And some people, want to take a little bit longer in their teaching degrees as a traditional offering because they have all sorts of other responsibilities in their lives. So it's not always for everybody. It is a particular approach, but whether it's a Nexus program or a Master of Teaching traditional approach, if you want to call it that, I don't think there is a traditional approach anymore. They're all quality programs, and that's really strong for us, particularly at La Trobe, is because the coursework is so framed and designed around evidence-informed approaches and really particularly around the science of learning, and the science of reading and literacy and writing is probably one of the very important parts of why people come to our programs.
Duncan, can I just add, every principal teacher in school, most of them are saying that this is a model that we wish every single student could participate, because there's that real marriage of theory and practice, real co-construction between and partnership between university and school.
Yeah, can I just add, it's not that people are looking at the Nexus program and saying that is more high quality. The high quality piece is the embedding in schools, absolutely. But in terms of a program of teacher education, there is quality across.
Okay, well, let's hear from a principal who has been employing Nexus teacher trainees. Barbara O'Brien, the principal of Greater Shepparton Secondary College. Let me bring you into this discussion. How did you and your school first get involved, and did you have any doubts about the merits of the program at the time before you started getting involved?
So the program, when I commenced at Greater Shepparton Secondary College, the program had already started, and it was a partnership between La Trobe and the school. And I think La Trobe actually approached the school and invited the school into the program. So then there was that thought of, this is going to be a groundbreaker for us as far as being able to employ staff that we get to know before they actually move into the classroom, that we get to see their skills a little bit, and they get a chance to actually take their time to get to know students, other staff, understand the skills that are required for teaching before they actually move into their classroom practice. Many students that come out of university, whilst they have their placements, they don't get to spend a whole year in a school, and as Miriam said, it is graduated. They gradually increase their time in the classroom, but they don't get to spend that whole year in a school, in the one school, and really get an understanding of how it operates. They don't get an understanding of, or a knowledge, or an appreciation for the education of kids. They don't get a relationship with kids. They don't get a relationship with the staff. So all of that really bodes for making that teacher feel really comfortable, or that candidate feel really comfortable before they actually go into a classroom to be the teacher in the classroom. So we've had great success from the Nexus program, and we've had scientists, accountants, engineers, as Joanna said, a whole variation of people have come into the school, and because of their previous experience, their life experiences, they become extremely strong teachers very early. And I think that's what many schools are wanting. They're wanting people to come in and to basically hit the ground running in a way. And many of these candidates have been able to do that.
It's interesting you say that, because I was going to ask you, do you notice any differences in the classroom performance between Nexus trainees and those teachers who've taken a more traditional route?
Yes, we do. And I'd have to qualify this by saying the students we've had are locals too. So we get a greater success of them remaining in the school because they live locally or they come from this area. So retention is better. And these students have an understanding of the actual community itself in many respects. So not all of them have been from the local community, but the majority of ours have been, and that's been highly successful for us. and they do understand this is a program that's going to take some time, but with the support, and they do get the mentor, as Joanna mentioned, they get a mentor. What we've also found is when they commence with us as educational support staff, we initially put them in right across the school, so they would have a experience in different domains or different areas across the school. And then after a while, we start to put them in the domain that they'll be actually teaching in. But we want them to experience right across the school, then be more focused on the area that they're going to be teaching in. So, yeah, it's been quite successful for us, or very successful.
It's really interesting what you're saying there. And I wonder, do students respond differently to trainees from the Nexus program who come in than they would do to other teachers in the classroom?
I don't believe so, because they have that opportunity to actually develop relationships with the students, not as a teacher for a start, but as an ES staff member. So that it's not as though they're coming in and having to, do the behaviour management, plan their lessons, teach the need of students, that sort of thing. They get actually that experience by being part of the domain. So all of our teachers work in teams. No one works on their own. And so they get that experience of being part of a team and learning, how the team operates, the support that's given to them. They get to understand their domain really well, what's expected of them once they are a teacher. So by the time they've been through that first year, the relationship they've developed with a lot of the students helps them when they become fully qualified teachers. And we found they haven't had that same difficulty setting relationships up and managing students as some of our other first year out teachers have.
Before this interview began, when I was thinking about questions to ask you, I was going to talk about, are there specific challenges to employing people from the Nexus program compared to hiring teachers by the traditional route? But it sounds from what you're saying that actually it's almost more challenging to hire teachers through traditional methods. Would that be right?
It's getting better, but I believe our Nexus students come in better prepared in many respects, yes.
Does that suggest that traditional teacher training then, that's what should be reformed and what should be changed to more reflect programs like Nexus, in your view?
I believe so. Like, I've probably been a person who's been banging on for a long time about how teachers, students at university should be placed in a school in their last year of training. They should be in a school under the guidance of an expert teacher instead of going into uni. So that's been my mantra for some time now. The Nexus has actually supported me with that. And I believe that students that actually spend a year in the school, getting to know the community, getting to know the teachers, the staff, the students, have a much better start off in their teaching career.
Okay, well, I think that's an opportune time to bring back in Joanna and Miriam, who presumably you'd agree with all of that.
Yes. I think when we first designed the program, it was very much about how do we position employment opportunities and also completely embedding Nexus teachers in the school context from the beginning as we can, because it is important to set them up with the course content. And the other really important piece of this is actually building really strong relationships with schools, and particularly with Barbara and Greater Shepparton. Not only is it about developing the workforce, but it's actually really developing relationships and engagement with the schools and the partners that we have with our Nexus teachers, our Nexus schools, and all our mentors, which is actually, and this is probably something Miriam could add, our spread is really wide-ranging and actually allowing for all sorts of schools in regional and rural communities to have access to high-quality teachers. So the embedding piece is absolutely the golden stamp of Nexus, but also the quality of the program and the relationships we build.
To play devil's advocate, what would you say to opponents who might argue that putting people into classrooms before they've completed all their teacher training, that's going to potentially lead to lower teaching standards, to not the correct pedagogical practices being shared or learnt in the first place before being put in the classroom. What would you respond to those arguments?
I would say that they're probably some of our strongest teachers. They've got life experience behind them. They've come into knowing that they want to be teachers and really committed to the program. And we've had, I can't speak highly enough of our students because they're some of our strongest teachers. And I think that's because they've got degrees in other areas. They've experienced life outside of education, doing something else, and they've realised that this is what they really want to do. And so they've come in with that passion and that drive to really do well. And, there has been some scepticism against having people like that in the early days. Schools would say, oh, no, I'm not going down that path. They're not properly trained or anything like that. But what we found is that because of their experiences outside of education, before they've come into education, that's actually boded really well with them. And they've just been really, really excellent to actually, assimilate into the school.
Barbara, when you speak to other principals, if there are some who are sceptical about programs like this, have their opinions been changed given your experience, or are they still sceptical even if you give such glowing reviews of this program?
No. I believe a lot of principals are changing their view on that now, and many are saying, how do I access this program? How can I get a Nexus student into my school? Yeah. So, and we sort of compete with each other to get them. That happens a little bit. I think now because, and Joanna mentioned, and so did Miriam, about the teacher shortage, and that has created a different view on how we look at recruiting teachers to into education, that there are many, many different pathways now, and this is a really highly successful one.
One of the arguments for alternative pathways into teaching is to broaden out the pool of teachers. And you mentioned, the variety of roles, accountants and so on, who've come into your school. Have you seen evidence, Miriam, that workforce diversity has improved? Are you seeing that at scale?
Oh, absolutely. And that is, that's one of the main drivers of the Nexus program, is diversifying the workforce. You can't be what you can't see. And I know people say that and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's actually true. And so what we do with the Nexus program is make sure that we do really have broad representative, and are inclusive of, people from different ethnic and racial identity, linguistic backgrounds, socioeconomic status, gender, disability, neurodivergence, migration, refugee status. As Barbara said, Barbara's in a regional sort of rural area. So we make sure that there are people from that particular area. So yes, we do. We have really been able to broaden the teaching workforce through the Nexus program.
Could programs like Nexus be scaled nationally or internationally? What would it take? What's your plans for the future? You mentioned early childhood education and care earlier.
Yes, as somebody said, we're aiming for world domination. There is definitely opportunities to scale up, and we're really working towards scaling up more broadly in Australia. And the scaling up is really about going back to, the naysayers, if you don't have a full degree, therefore you're not ready to teach. What's really fabulous with this kind of program is you're kind of doing both at the same time. You're engaging with the coursework. You've come in with your own experience, but you're engaging with the coursework. You're testing it in the setting, in schools, in classrooms. So it's almost a kind of gathering of data, like you're learning things and then you're applying it. But by doing that, if you scale up this program more broadly, you really have that opportunity of having reach into regional and rural communities across the seas, but also across Australia more broadly. And there are typical challenges and opportunities that regional and rural contexts bring to a workforce that comes out of Nexus.
Is there anything particular you'd like to see the government doing or the education department doing to support your program and others like this?
I think it's the obvious one, more funding. Duncan, that would be great. Isn't that always the answer? And we're sort of at a juncture point. Nexus has been operating for 5 years, and we have been financially funded and supported by both Commonwealth and state government. So we've been very fortunate. But we can see now that we're sort of entering a new phase of, the profession where maybe this shortage is not as extreme or acute as it was previously. And so we are looking at ways that we can maybe co-design the next iteration of Nexus. So possibilities around what that might look like to best meet workforce needs would be a great opportunity too.
Given everything that's been said already, would one possible option be that traditional teacher training programs bring on board many of the elements from Nexus if it is so successful?
The short answer is yes. There is a funding component, particularly if you're with the employment-based pathway, but also embedding in a school context. Because one of the things that we also really are challenged and have to look at it systematically is the workload of Nexus teachers coming into, they're studying a course, but they're also embedded in a school and they have their responsibilities in a school. And that's where we've taken that challenge with an asynchronous course, but it does need to be managed where the placement in a school and really having that authentic experience along with the quality of the academic course needs to be well planned and well designed if it was to be scaled up as a normal way of becoming a teacher.
Just on that, Joanna's point, what I'd also like to see is Nexus move into the first few years of their time in the profession. And so that we can make sure, because we know that the first 3 years for an early career teacher are probably the most challenging of their career. So we'd love to see that really extensive wraparound support that we offer our Nexus students continue when they're, in their first 3 years to make sure that, they are well supported and that they stay in the profession.
And Barbara, what's your view on this? What kind of support do you think schools need specifically to make these kinds of programs successful?
So we always have a mentor for each of our new teachers, whether they're graduate teachers or as teachers just starting new in the school. So they get a mentor and a buddy. So the mentor looks more at supporting them with their teacher practice, that sort of thing. The buddy just supports them with, here's the photocopier, here's where you find this, here's where you find that, on a day-to-day basis. But the mentor looks more at that instructional coach type thing and supporting them that way. And what we have found is that the department now has got a program called Career Start, and that program is really for graduate teachers. They come in and then work with those teachers. So our Nexus students who are, after they've fully qualified, after their first year of teaching or in their first year of teaching, they become part of this Career Start program. And they get a lot of professional learning, a lot of support delivered that way through the department. But it is really crucial that teachers in their early career get that support, because we don't want to overwhelm them and turn them away from the profession when we know that with a bit of support and a bit of care, they can have a long-term career in education.
Okay. Looking ahead, and this is a global podcast for a global audience, so looking beyond Australia for a moment, if a policymaker or a principal is listening to this somewhere, what's the one key piece of advice that you would share if they're wanting to create an alternative pathway into teaching similar to what's been described about the Nexus program? Maybe Joanna, start with you.
Okay. I think you've got to start big. So start with system change rather than looking at individual schools. And by that will allow for all stakeholders to have a buy-in. There is a funding component to this. It does cost money, but you can also target the funding structure for it to be incredibly impactful if the whole system is involved and there's a buy-in.
Is it considerably more expensive than a traditional teaching qualification?
So in terms of the expense for an embedded placement in a school, because of the employment and the mentoring wraparound, it is more expensive. It's not significant in terms of eye-watering, but it does have a cost on it.
Okay. And Miriam, your key bit of advice, if there's one thing which you think people should really consider if they're listening to this in a different country about what they should do to try to set up this kind of program if they're interested, what would it be?
So in the same way that it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to raise great teachers. And so universities can't do it alone and schools can't do it alone. So you need to establish a really strong partnership and a very strong community of practice where you have equal buy-in, equal expectation, equal responsibility, and commitment to making sure that the program, you see the program to fruition. And there also needs to be that co-design element too. So I think that's probably my one piece of advice.
And the last word goes to Barbara.
I really believe it's about being open to new ideas and new ways of actually, recruiting teachers into the profession and supporting them during their early years and then further through their career. We've got to look at lots of different ways now, not just through the mainstream way. And it's proving that the different ways to actually recruit staff can be highly successful. Nexus is one of those. And I just feel we've got to remain open to lots of different ways and alternative ways of employing teachers and bring them into our schools.
Thank you so much to all of you for speaking to me today. That was Principal Barbara O'Brien at the end there from Greater Shepparton Secondary College in the Australian state of Victoria. And before that as well, we were listening to Professors Joanna Barbousas and Miriam Tanti from Trobe University in Melbourne. Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, we are having this chat because the OECD released a new paper called Alternative Pathways into Teaching, Broadening Access and Expanding Diversity. You can find that on the OECD website, oecd.org. And if you like this podcast, go on, give us a like, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. That's it for now. Please do join us again for another episode of Top Class soon. All the best.